Hello and welcome to this short overview of some of the new features included in the August 2013 Rapport 3 upgrade. So now we're going to have a look at some of the key updates that are happening within the project's workstage overview and fee budget planning area. So I'm going to select the projects tab, which will take me through to the projects, and I've created a new job called 15 Forest Way. So the bit we're mainly interested in is the fee budget planning area. So when we first come to the budget plan, we'll be presented with our standard create new wizard. So we're asked the standard sort of 5 or 6 questions, starting with project currency, the fee mode, so whether it's lump sum, time and expense, or percent of total project value, the total fee. So in this case, I'm just going to start with a lump sum fee of £50,000. A start date, I'm going to put in today's date, and it's a 6-month project, so I'm going to choose months from the drop down. Now we have our standard workstage template list, and I've set up a 3-stage template just to make things easy to see what's going on. So once I've done that, I click the create fee plan, and as before it will then go away and create our fee plan. But the actual fee plan area has now changed considerably, and we'll look at and talk through all the different options that are available within the fee plan. So the first tab we're looking at is the workstages overview. So once the page is loaded up, you'll notice straight away that it looks different from our existing workstage overview. For a start, we now have this common toolbar, which is classed as called a ribbon across the top here, and this is very similar to how Office, the Microsoft Office suite of products work. And this is going to be a toolbar or ribbon that we're going to roll out for all of the key sort of areas. So we're starting with the fee budget plan, but we'll also be applying this to things like timesheets and the personal expenses in time. For a start, the icons are a lot bigger, so they're much easier to read and see on some of the higher res monitors. It's much tidier, and each of the groups or collections of icons and functions now have a brief description, so it's much easier to understand what it is they actually do. Okay, so just working left to right, we've got the save icon, which has now been moved from the bottom and is a big chunky icon that can be seen. The view reports is the same as the printer icon previously, and will allow you to access the reports. We've then got the full screen mode, which we'll come on to and I'll be using very shortly. The currency for the project. Again, one of the key functions that we've now added is the ability to change currency. So whereas before you would have to have gone through to our technical support desk to change a project currency, this can now be done by yourselves. So you can actually choose a new currency and branch that the project could be set to, and it will walk you through the process and the steps required to do that. We've then got our fee structure, again, which we'll talk of in more detail, the fee breakdown, a contingency amount, the ability to add work stages from the workstage template. And if I click on the workstage template, this is another area that's changed from the previous version. So it's laid out in a slightly different way. We can select our existing templates from here. So if I click on our simple stage or our Reba work stages, this will then list out our work stages. Now the difference between this and the previous version is, whereas we still have the fee percentage split and also the duration percentage split, the expense percentage split has been removed. That was a disused function anyway within Rapport. We've now tidied up and removed that. But what you will notice is we've now got this closed mode. So what this is relating to is whether the work stage appears within timesheets or not. So if it's set to manual, it's up to the project runner then to either open or close the workstage. If it's set to duration, then it's based on the dates for that particular workstage. So if the timesheet falls within the dates that the workstage is open, it'll be visible. If it doesn't, then it won't be visible. So you can set the template workstages up to be based on either manual or duration. So once you've set up your workstage templates, you can then go through the standard wizard, and then you're presented with the page that we've got here at the moment. The last two icons, we've got the grade rates, and again, selecting the grade rates console brings open a new window. And just to talk a little bit around this as well to make sure people fully understand what's included within this. There's three sort of separate areas to this. There's the cost rates that are used for the project, and then there's the charge rates that can be used with the project. Now, as you may already know, Rapport works on the basis of staff cost rates, and then the difference between the cost rate and the charge rate is the profit margin, and then obviously there is the actual charge rates themselves. Now, the only bit you'd want to change on it, all these rates are centrally administered. So when you first create a project, it will then look at this centrally set of cost and charge rates and pull them in for the project. As soon as that happens, the link is broken, so you can then make changes to things like the charge rate without affecting the central rates. Now, the charge rates are set up per project, and then you can change them. If you've agreed with the client a different set of charge out rates, if you're using a time and expense job, for example, you can then set those charge rates to be different. The cost rates you would never change for a project. Okay, so they're always going to be set the same because people's salaries and the overhead will tend to stay for the project, although you do have the option to change the forecast or the planned cost rate for the project. Now, the reason there's a live cost rate and there's a default cost rate is to really give you further information. So if you do make a change to the planned cost rate, you can see how that compares to the central cost rates which are set up for the system, and also the live cost rates which are coming from the HR package. So the HR system for every member of staff has a project cost rate which is made of their base cost rate, which is their salary, multiplied by an overhead. Now, it averages the rates for each grade to give you an idea of how far the planned cost rates deviate away from that. So the idea is that when you initially set a project up, you may come back to the project a year and a half, 2 years later for a long-term project and you're still planning that. You could then see how far the live cost rates are starting to deviate away from those initial cost rates that were set up. Okay, so in this example here, we're planning based on a £98 per hour cost rate for a director, but from within the HR area, which is what timesheet then uses when people put their actual timesheets in, it's currently at £108. So you can see there's already a £10 discrepancy there. The other feature we have within here is the inflationary amount that could be added to those rates. So, for example, if it's a job that's longer than a year, you can set up a particular inflationary rate to be applied from the month and the year onwards every single year to those cost rates. So again, you can anticipate the fact that costs will go up, people's wages will go up, overheads will go up, and then you can include that into your planned work. Now again, this is more is more important obviously for very long-term projects. Anything up to 2, 3, 4 years, inflation starts to play a bigger role in that. And then the final option you've got is at the bottom here, we've got select a grade. Now this is really here to enable you, if you're planning a project at a local location but using resource from another location, it will automatically bring through their rates. So for an example of this is an office in London win some work, but they're going to use their overseas offices, especially if they're like a low cost centre. You can use the overseas offices to actually do the work. So you can incorporate their grade structure into the project, so you're actually planning against a cheaper resource than what you would for your local rates. Okay, the final option we've got is when you come to the planning part of using Rapport, you can either use days or you can use full-time equivalent, so this FTE percentage, which means you can then use percentages as opposed to the number of days. Okay, and I'll explain what that means as we go on further. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually open this out in full screen mode so we can see the new parts of the system that are available. Now, in this particular instance, we've got 3 panels that are available. So this has changed quite considerably from the previous workstage overview. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually minimize the bottom 2 and work our way through each of these individually. So the first one is to do with dates and durations. So we have our 3 workstages that we set up, so start, middle and final, 1, 2 and 3. And the first part of this is to do with the dates. So we have our standard start and end date, which by clicking will enable you to then make changes to that. And then we have the number of calendar days between the start and the end date. Okay, so if we want to extend out the end date, if I select the end date here, I then brings up a big calendar. So if I jump to say October 2013, change it to 16th, that date will then change. And you'll notice on the right hand side our Gantt chart here will also change based on that information. We've replaced the previous padlock icon with this new green and red arrow icon, which indicates whether the work stages are locked together as they are at the moment or unlocked. If I unlock the work stages, so if I click on unlock here, this will enable me to then set a start date that isn't the end date of the previous work stage. So for example, if both stage start and middle were going to be starting at the same time, I can then select the start date, go back to August the 14th, and now you can see that both stages start at the same time. Okay, this also applies to if there's a big gap between stages. Again, it allows you to connect the work stages. If I then click this back on again, you'll now notice that the work stages are both locked again. Okay. So the other two columns we've got here are for the status of the particular work stage. So this is going back to the idea of allowing work stages to appear within timesheets or not. So you can manually do this by either opening or closing the work stage. So if I set this to closed, the work stage won't appear in the timesheets, or I can set this to by duration, and in which case it will actually use the start and the end date for that work stage. And so timesheets that are being inputted between those two dates the work stage will then appear for those users. And where this is beneficial is, for example, if someone hasn't done their timesheets for a few weeks, but the duration has now gone past when that work stage should be open, by virtue of the fact that those timesheets are within the specified dates, it will still be open for them. Whereas the manual method, if you close off a work stage, obviously whether someone's done their timesheets or not, it will be closed off for them. And then the final part of this is the probability. Now this is based on, some companies use it, some don't, but the previous version, the probability was set per project. So for confirmed work, it was obviously at 100%, but for speculative jobs, you could then set a predefined percentage for the chance of winning the work. So this would then be applied for things like billing forecast or fee forecasts, whereby a job that was, say, a £100,000 fee, but only had a 50% chance of winning, the fee would then be broken down to £50,000 or calculated down to £50,000. So rather than doing this on a project level now, you can actually do this on a work stage level. So for example, you may have won the start stage of stage 1, but the latter two stages only have a medium chance of winning those particular stages. Now everything barred and confirmed can be changed. So we've used, for example here, low, medium and high, and each of these actually has behind it a percentage. So for example, medium is a 50% chance of winning that particular job. So that particular stage. But as part of the setup, this could be a description, so as we've got here, so low, medium, high, or it can actually be the percentage itself. So we can have 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. So this is something for you to think about and set up internally, and then for us to then set the system up to work on that basis. But by default, we have low, medium and high. Okay, so that's the work stage dates and duration. So the next part of this is looking at the work stage fees and breakdown. So we have our standard 3 stages here we set up previously, and then we have a number of columns that enable you to then be able to edit that information. So the first one being the stage fee. So we can actually go in as we could before and change the stage fee. The big difference between this and the previous version is that you can now set up your initial fee structure, or your base fee structure as we class it, and then you can add in additional work stages that fit outside of that. So where this would come into play is if you've set up your initial fee structure, but you've then got variations or additional work coming on. So to give you an example of this, I'm just going to open the work stage dates duration bit up so we can see what's happening, and I'm going to click on the add new work stage. So by selecting that, it then opens up a new line, or gives us a new line to enter information on. So this is a key thing to remember. You can't just type in a new line like you could previously. You have to click the add new work stage. So from here I can now add in additional work. We're going to give this the work stage reference of add. I'm not going to set the dates for the moment. So once I've set this up, you'll then notice that in the work stage fees breakdown, we now have this additional work stage appear. Now under the fee type, the first 3 are set to base, and I'm going to set this one to additional. And I'm going to give it an estimate of a £5,000 fee. Now, as I type this in, we'll notice at the top now we have our split here. So we've got a £50,000 base level fee and a £5,000 additional, which gives us a total fee value of £55,000. Okay, so I'm just going to save this. So that's the first way of using it. So you can split out your base fee from your additional works or additional work stage or additional fee from using this fee type control here. So the two methods of then changing the fee is either manually typing in the fee, as I've done so far, or we can start to use the percentages on the left here. So we can lock the fee. So we're locking the original fee at £50,000, and now I'm going to use the percentages. So if I was to type this as 30%, this is now turned red and is indicating that we've got a total of 105%. And obviously the base levels turn red and let us know this as well. So the idea is to get this back to it being 100%, and then it will allow us to save it. But it doesn't affect the additional fee, only the bit that's part of your original fee structure. So if I now turn this down to 20%, this will now realign. So now this is set to 100%, as is the base fee, so I can click save and it will allow me to save that information. So the key points are here that you can set up your base fee and then you can add additional fees after that. So we've also then got a field where we can then set whether the work stage is a time and expense work stage. So this additional one is, and the initial stage is time and expense. Again, this is for reference only, so it's just allowing the system to know that it's a time and expense. And then the final part of this is target margin. So we can set up what the target margin is. So this is exactly the same as the previous system. So with this base level of information, we've now got a target budget and a target profit margin based on the fee and the percentage you've put in here. The remainder of the columns here are all react to once you start to put in your planned or your planned budget together. So I'm going to save this, and then we're going to take a look at the outline budget planner, which is again a new panel that's not been available before. So I'm going to shrink up the top one and then open up the outline budget planner. So the purpose of the outline budget planner is it gives the project runner the opportunity to very quickly put a budget together for early stage projects or projects that you haven't yet won, speculative projects, or for projects that are very small. So what we have is our list of work stages again on the left here, and across the top we have all the grades that are available to us. And it's just a matter of then starting to plumb in some figures against this. So for example, if I know for stage 1 we're going to require 2 days of a director, we're going to require 3 days of a senior architect, and then 15 days of an architect. As I'm typing this information in, across the top here we can start to see how the calculations are putting together information based on that. So for example, here we have the total planned cost and the total profit, and what that equates to as a profit margin. So we're still way above our 15%. So as I start to add in more time, so I know we're actually going to maybe require 20 days for an architect and 10 days of a senior architect, we've now gone below the 15% mark, which has turned this red. So we're still making a profit, but it's turned red to let us know that we've gone below our 15%. So I'm just going to save this. And then we're going to apply the exact same logic to stages 2 and 3. So for stage 2, we're going to have 4 days of a director, 15 days of a senior architect, and 25 days of an architect. And in this case, we're going to make an 18% profit margin, but it stays green because we're above our target. And then for the final stage, the same process applies again. So I'm going to put that we need 2 days of a director, 8 days of a senior architect, and 15 days of an architect. And again, at this time, we've actually made a loss. So we're making a 13% loss here on stage 3, which equates to £1,385. But overall, we're going to be making a 16.3% profit margin. I'll just click save on that. So you can see you can use this outline budget tool to very quickly put a budget cost together and then review that against your targets that you've set up here for the project. One other way of using this fee planning area is also if you haven't been given a fee and you want to work the other way around, so you're working from the bottom up, then we've got this labour charge coming through. So this is indicating, based on the resources we put in here, is what we should be charging. So if we haven't set the fee up yet, then we can use this as a guideline to what we should be charging, so we can then use this information to put into the stage fee and work the other way around. Okay, so next we're going to look at the labour budget planner and how the outline budget planner integrates with that. So if I now minimise or reduce down the size of this screen and move across to the labour budget plan, we can see that the outline budget tool has already pre-populated our labour budget plan. So this is great that we've saved us the time of entering in this information ourselves. So for each of the grades we've added per work stage, this has then been subdivided by the duration of the work stage. Okay, so for example, 10 days here has been divided into 3.33 per month for the duration of that work stage. Now you'll also notice that everything's read only, so we can't actually do anything with any of this data here. And the reason being is that if you're still using the outline budget tool, then you are unable to use this unless we unlock the plan. And unlocking the plan means we could then use this labour budget plan, and then the outline budget tool becomes a read-only view on this data. So it's important to remember you can only work in two modes. So you're either using the outline budget tool and then it's updating this, or we're using the labour budget plan and then it's updating the outline budget tool, and that becomes read-only. So to unlock the plan, if we click on this button here, unlock plan, and select OK, this has now taken us into this second mode where we can now update and edit the budget plan, but we can't do that via the homepage tool. So by going back to the work stages, if I scroll down to the bottom, you can now see this is now a read-only view on that data, so we don't have our edit option anymore. Okay, so back on the labour budget plan, just to highlight a couple of new tools. Again, same as the work stages overview, we've now got this new toolbar at the top. All the same features are there, so we've still got the bulk entry and the bulk move, which I won't go into today. On the left hand side, we've got a couple of new features. We've got this add and edit notes, and this is a very useful tool, and is available on the labour budget plan, the expense planner, sub-consultants and the billing. So if I want to add a note against a particular cell, so for example if I choose September for the start stage, I'm choose this cell here, and then I click on the add edit notes option, select OK, this will then enable me to add a note against that particular cell. So at the bottom we've got a space for adding the note. You can see we're against start stage and we're September 2013. So I can now type in whatever my note is, click save, and it will now add that note against that particular cell. You'll notice it's also updated to let me know that there's a note, an individual note against the items here, and you can see we've now got a little red arrow up here. If I move the mouse over, it tells me what the note is, so in this case my note. Okay, you don't have to add a note against a cell. I can just add a general note against the whole project for the labour budget plan. So if I type here another note, again click save, you'll notice now it's against all work stages and all months, so it's not specific to that particular work stage or month. And all it will do is then update the add edit notes area to say there's two notes, but obviously there won't be the red arrow because we've not selected add against anything. Okay, so this is the same sort of idea and ribbon that then appears for both the expense planner. So we've got the add edit notes here, sub-consultants, and billing plan. So the add edits notice is available against all of those particular budget planning areas. Okay, as mentioned earlier, we were looking at the probabilities that can now be set per work stage. And just to give you an example of how that now integrates with some of the fee planning and billing reports, we're just going to very quickly add some billing information against this particular project. So if I add in £5,000 per month for this stage, in fact what I'm going to use is our painting tool here, so this bulk enter. So I'm going to type in 5,000 up here. I've got the tick on, and this will now enable me to now, wherever I click, £5,000 is copied in. So we've done our start stage. I'm now going to do one of these, use one of the medium probability stages that we set up earlier. So likewise, start to then populate the information that's in here. Okay, so we've done both of those now. If I save this and now look at one of the fee projection reports, so it's a screen report and it's called billing schedules. So I select billing schedules and view screen report. This has now opened up a new window with the report in. Now we can see at the bottom here we've got 15 Forest Way in twice. And the reason for that is because we had the start stage in as a confirmed item of work, whereas the next two stages, so stage 2 and 3, were set as medium. So you can see it actually separates the job out. So we've got our confirmed work and our non-confirmed work. We can then look at grouping this information together. So for example, if I set this up by probability now, you can see we've got our confirmed work at the top and our medium probability work at the bottom. So we've got 15 Forest Way in confirmed and 15 Forest Way in our medium probability work. And another thing that can be applied to help sort of factor down that. Now, as I mentioned earlier, in our medium probability we'd set to 50% as a probability factor. Now at the top here we can see we've got an option to say apply probability. So I've selected this to yes. You'll notice that the fee amounts for the forest job have now been split down. So you can see this has been brought down to 2,500. Now if I put this back to no, it would go back up to the original amount, which is 5,000. So you can actually use the probabilities as a means to factor your fee amounts as well. Okay, so the last two sections we're going to take a look at are firstly the performance graphs. So the performance graphs will now stretch to full screen. So that's all the graphs that are available will stretch to full screen by selecting the full screen button. So again, it makes much better use of the size of the screen that you're using. And also with the budgets and actual summary, we've now reintroduced the ability to turn certain traces off of the graph. So in this example here, we've got our auto fee plan, which is the blue line. Our yellow line is the billing forecast, and our green line is our budget forecast, so what we plan for labour and expenses. Okay. And these could be turned off. So for example, if we want to turn off the auto fee plan, the blue line, if I click the save button, the blue line will then disappear off the trace. And if I want to shrink back down, click the within rapport, and that will take the graphs back down to a single frame again. Okay, so the last two tabs, again, performance summaries, we've added some extra modes within here. So whereas we've had our standard monthly totals, which are based as described on here by month, and then we've got the breakdown for forecast and actuals for expenses, labour, billing, and then a profit amount as a monetary sum as well as a percentage. So we've now added in this monetary amount as well as a percentage. We've also got the split by work stage. So we can have a look at work stages individually, and again with the same splits again, or as a running total. Okay, so by using this mode up here, we can split between the two, and we can see what we've got as forecast, actual costs, expense forecast against actuals, and then billing forecast against actuals, and then our profit amount on a month by month basis. Again, this can be pushed to full screen mode if required. So our final change is really to do with the work in progress area. Okay, so on the WIP page, we're looking at some of the sort of new parts that we've got on the WIP page, and we've sort of redeveloped the information that's coming through on the WIP area. So we've got our standard month snapshot at the top here, so we can select the month we want to edit. But before we can come on to the estimated completion, we've got some extra information. So we've got the fee amount coming through, what we've billed to date, the labour cost to date and forecast, so it's adding together the timesheet cost data, and then the forecast labour budget planning costs. The actual labour cost just on its own, so that's coming from timesheets. Then a percentage for how much we've billed so far, so comparing the actual billing to date to the workstage fee, and then the labour cost complete so far. So that's comparing the labour cost to date against the labour cost to date plus the forecast. We've then got an area here for the project runner to then put in their estimated completion percentage, and based on that percentage it will then indicate how much we should have billed so far. So if I put 50%, we should have billed £7,500 of that £15,000 fee. The other option we've got in here is this WIP from a labour cost per percent complete. So again, this is looking at and comparing this percentage here and then using that to compare to the fee. So in other words, if this was saying we've done 50% of the work so far, we should have billed 50% of the fee. So that would also say £7,500. So again, this can be done on a month by month basis. And just to give you an example here of one of the WIP reports that we can then use and access. There's a new one that's been added as part of the upgrade, and it's a screen report. So if I select screen from the drop down menu here, that will filter down to, so we're just looking at screen reports, and there's one at the bottom here called WIP billing, labour and subjective. So if I select that and say view screen report, we've then got a list of all the projects that we've currently got on this demo data. We've got a set of filters at the top here. I'm just going to expand this out so I can get a bit more room. So we've got a series of drop downs here where you can filter the information by branch, director, status of project, and then looking to the month ending of, in this case, August, but you can look back in time to any month and it will bring you all the data up to that end point, end of that month. And rather than going through all the details here, but what this is then pulling through is some basic project information. We're then looking at billing information, so what you've actually invoiced, how much is remaining, and then your actual core plus forecast hours, so the number of hours there. We're then looking at the actual and forecast costs, so we've got the core hours, non-core hours, the labour cost, expense cost, total cost to date. And then the final bit is sort of the percent comparisons. So we can see where total cost to complete, the labour cost to complete, the billing completion, estimated completion. So we've really put every single option on here, and the idea is really to show you the type of information that comes through. But one of the other key parameters of this report is you can access the WIP page directly from here. So if I select one of these, this icon, this will open up the WIP page in its own window. So you don't need to go back to Rapport to search for the project and edit it. And also when you do edit it, this last updated date will then appear. So this is a very good way of making sure that if you're using that subjective WIP, the subjective or estimated completion date column, then this is a very good way of making sure people are doing it on a regular basis and keeping it up to date. Okay, so that concludes today's sort of introduction to the new features. If you have any questions, then please register those with support.